Hi all, I'm here with Professor Igor Grossman. It's a great pleasure for me. And Igor, thank you for the follow-up interview after your talk on meta judgment, meta theories, and belief about good judgment across societies. And if you have not heard it, I highly recommend you first to uh, listen to it. But still, if you have not heard it yet, can you, Igor, please explain your findings to an undergrad student from unrelated field?
Sure, with pleasure. Thank you so much for having me again. And thank you all for watching this. So in the talk, I talked about meta judgment, and essentially it is about how people think through and figure out how to make their decisions. So like, what are they guided by? And in simple terms, we're trying to figure out, okay, when you're trying to make a decision, how do you go about doing this? What do you consider to be the best way to decide? Is it to go with your gut? Is it to follow some expert advice? Is it to think really, really hard about something? Or is it even to do something entirely different? And so what's really interesting that we have observed when doing research on this topic is that although there are, of course, many different ideas across cultures about what makes up good judgment or sound judgment, it seems like that depending on the situation, people switch between strategies in a fairly systematic fashion, and it happens in most societies. And I guess this flexibility in our thinking about judgment, in our meta judgment, helps us to deal with a variety of different challenges we encounter in our lives. Because sometimes we may want to, for instance, have some kind of top-down rule that we will follow. And sometimes we may want to make a holistic decision, balancing different interests where there is no clear-cut rule that we can follow. Sometimes we may be better off asking others, and sometimes we may be better off going with our gut.
Thank you. This is very interesting. Can you please elaborate a little bit? Do I understand you correctly when you mean depends on the situation? Do you mean depends on how important is the decision, like buying a car or doing a grocery shopping? Is this is what you mean depends on the situation?
Well, yes and no. So let's take a set of examples. For instance, in some contexts, your decision is about uh, just very efficiently writing down the list of choices, figuring out which of those options are uh, giving you the greatest bang for the buck, and go with the option that gives you the greatest benefit. And that's how you make this very sort of analytical decision, a very rational decision, if you want. And other times you're trying to make a decision and it's a situation where you just cannot do that. And in many aspects of our lives, you indeed cannot do it. It's not like, you're just the former station that I just mentioned. It is like, for instance, uh, if you are investing in the stock market, like what do you want to invest in a given moment? Well, what do you have? What are your risk preferences? Okay, based on your risk preferences, here are the stocks that you could possibly invest. Done, if you want, sort of like a very sort of simplistic way. Or another way, another example, another type of situation, you're trying to buy a house, a priori determine what your budget is and what you want, whether you want this number of rooms or this number of rooms, a light, this part of town, this part of town, what can you afford, and so on and so forth. And based on that, you some kind of like find some kind of an optimal solution for you. Well, except that, of course, that's not really how we do those decisions. And many aspects of our lives, it's not that easy to create a top-down list and equate, for instance, different features, for instance, that you may want. You may want to have a larger number of rooms, but you also may want to have a particular part of town. And then you have your budget, and then you try to figure out, well, okay, can I really buy a house that is already done, or do I just buy something that I need to flip and improve on? That means that you, of course, need to invest into it, and it's kind of uncertain. Will you be able to improve it? Will you be able to actually flip that house in the short term? So you start right away thinking, as a lot of uncertainty comes in, and you make that decision in a very holistic fashion. You throw away all that knowledge that you made about that list and so on. So it's a very, very different situation. So what I'm trying to say is, like, when I say like that, depending on the situation, is that sometimes it is of benefit, and when we think what is sort of like a sound way to make a decision, is to be very analytical, very top down, do some kind of a mental calculus, boom, you're done. And in many aspects of our lives, that is not the way we can afford making a decision, because either things are incommensurable, they are not even on the same scale, or there are some kind of long-term considerations. For instance, will I be able to flip a house? Will I be able to make those changes in time so that I actually enjoy living in it? Or will I be living in some kind of semi-finished ruin for the rest of my life, or maybe for the next 10 years until it will become enjoyable, by which time I may not even want to enjoy it anymore because my preferences will change entirely. So many aspects of our lives, we have those type of situations. And in those situations, of course, what is the notion of a sound, a good decision is not just some kind of mental analytical calculus and rational decision tree, but instead of that, we kind of make those decisions in a reasonable fashion, very holistically.
So basically, you can think about it like making decisions like an economist in a quantifiable way versus more thinking like about all the problems, as you said, in a more complex environment, taking into account those things that you cannot predict, etc., etc. Right?
That's right, and I mean, I would say we should not be dissing economists here either, because there are clearly situations in which going what's best based on some kind of analytical calculus is the way to do it, and there are many aspects of our lives where we do benefit from this, having certain set of rules. Developing some kind of systems to efficiently process information. And I think people throughout centuries, if not millennia, have had certain domains of their lives, certain ecological niches where they used some form of those rules. But then there are also many other aspects of their lives where those economic rules, if you want to call them economic rules, don't really apply. And I think those are the ones that we are probably finding, as psychologists, very exciting about. And unfortunately, much of our decision-making apparatus and research has really focused as much on them as it potentially should.
I see. And how do you plan to extend this exciting line of research?
Well, if you, as you know, the majority of the studies in judgment decision making really just focus on a few countries in the West, and in Israel, and potentially in Western Europe, or in Europe in general. But there are hardly any studies done in Africa, hardly any studies done in Americas and South America, or South or Southeast Asia. So for me, one very interesting question is like, what are the ideas about what is even a notion of a good decision in different parts of the world? What would people in, let's say, Brazil, or in Ghana, or in Sri Lanka consider to be the wise or sound way of navigating complex issues that they encounter in their lives? And so that is what I'm very excited about to do right now. We have a large-scale initiative with 15 countries where we try to first gather narratives about difficult life decisions that people are experiencing. What are the most difficult challenges in their lives? And then try to understand what are the strategies that people consider to be wise or sound for navigating those complex life challenges. And then we will be modeling the actual effectiveness of those strategies, look at situations under which people encounter those or the other challenges, as well as what strategies do they actually use. So really, through that, expanding our scope of judgment decision-making research.
That sounds really exciting. By the way, do you find more commonalities or more differences? And I know that it's a work in progress, so maybe you don't have strict answer right away, or maybe it's very complicated, but still.
From that study, from this setup, from the Wise Judgment Consortium, as we call it, we don't know. This is really just the work in its infancy. From a range of other projects that led to the Wise Judgment Consortium, to the founding of this initiative, there is some evidence that there is actually quite a bit of commonality. For instance, it seems like in many parts of the world, people, despite the fact that there are also often this kind of portrayals that collectivists would really go with whatever others are telling them, with whatever the family is telling them or their friends, often at the expense of their personal preferences. In most parts of the world, people actually go with their personal preferences above and beyond anything else. And also in most parts of the world, people really don't like the wisdom of crowds options. Why? That's an interesting question. Is it because there's a greater sense of accountability? Is it something else? But that's not something that we a priori expected, for instance. And we often find those examples. For instance, another one that I also thought there would be a huge variability, and so far I don't see it, is this notion of rational judgment that we often emphasize in judgment decision making and economics. It of course is present in and taught in many parts of the world, but it often stands in contrast to this kind of more holistic notion of a reasonable judgment. It's like, be reasonable in making your decision. By that, we often mean that you have to balance different interests, that you kind of balance whatever is important for you and what is important for potentially your society. Try to really somehow integrate those incommensurable values in a holistic fashion. And again, I thought, well, that's weird. That's kind of like, sounds like a very esoteric concept, but turns out that even if you look at Pakistan, if you look at China, if you look at various Spanish-speaking countries, you see this distinction there too. So there again, I was wrong. I thought there would be huge difference, and I'm sure there is. But obviously, the terms themselves can mean different things in different languages. But this kind of dichotomy of different forms of deliberating and sound deliberation, it seems to persist in various societies.
I think it's a good news in a sense, not you being wrong, but that there is more commonalities between different cultures than maybe we would expect. And this brings me to my next question. Can you please elaborate about the Wise Judgment Consortium, which I have personally joined a while ago? And I would be happy to know who can join it and what exactly are the opportunities there.
Gladly. So the Wise Judgment Consortium is a transnational network. It's an interdisciplinary network of scientists who are interested in decolonizing and expand our understanding of judgment and decision making beyond the dominant paradigms that we have developed in North America, English-speaking North America in particular, and Western Europe. And essentially try to go beyond the perspectives that we often bring in from the global north to the global south and elsewhere, and often impose in other countries. And asking the question, well, okay, so what are the life's most challenging issues in your part of the world? How do you go about navigating those issues? How do you make a decision? And is it really about optimal or about something else? So that's where we start. Anybody who is interested can join. So far, we started, for instance, with 12 countries. Now we are up to 15. And we have infrastructure to support, for instance, conducting the studies in other parts of the world, even though we cannot really pay at this moment yet, like but that's something that we can possibly solve through additional grants. So there are many opportunities to collect data, opportunities to write grants for getting more support for staff, opportunities to analyze data, and to interact with other scholars. Maybe the most exciting part, from very different parts of the world with very different perspectives on what judgment means.
I see. I think it's generally one of the exciting things in academia that you can meet very different, bright people from different places. And tell me, please, is it more related to grad students, perhaps even undergrad, or to the senior scholars, who is more uh, supposed to join? Or
The idea is to start with already existing academics to enable further transfer of knowledge. But at the same time, I would not exclude the possibility that ambitious and eager graduate students or postdoctoral fellows would be able to join and contribute as well. So there are many opportunities. We try not to be too hierarchical.
excellent. So we will put a link, and I encourage those who are interested in this interesting project to join. And going from your research to more general questions, what is, in your opinion, the most pressing issue nowadays in social sciences?
That's very difficult to answer because uh, first, most scientists, being myopic, believe that whatever they are working on is the most interesting and important and exciting and difficult thing to work on, because obviously, why would they work on this otherwise? Uh, and so, for instance, I study wisdom and judgment or expert judgment, and of course, I believe that those are the most important topics because they permeate so many different domains of their lives, of people's lives. But at the same time, I'm just succumbing to the same egocentric myopia as most of my colleagues have, I think. I do think that, there's quite a bit of discussion nowadays about sort of lack of wisdom, be it in the political domain, in interpersonal domain, when we're talking about various complex systems, be it concerning environment, concerning international relations, climate, AI-driven technologies, and so on and so forth, labor market shifts due to AI technologies. I think many of those things come back to this distinction between complex solutions that are really, really hard to grasp and figure out, and very attractive simplistic solutions that the populace often seeks, because is that very easy and tempting when somebody can tell you that they can solve all the problems in the world and make your country great again, or really help you be the leader and bring back greater prosperity. I mean, of course, those are great ideas, and it's very, very attractive. And if somebody can sell you simplistic solutions for that, people are buying that, as we see in many parts of the world. And of course, we know from psychology that that's literally the opposite of what people need, because if the issues are challenging, complex, just providing something simplistic will probably not work. In fact, this will introduce even more problems. So from that perspective, I think figuring out ways how to navigate that, how to help people maintain and appreciate the complexity, how to navigate ill-defined problems where there are no clear-cut right or wrong solutions. Those are very, very important questions, in my opinion. And those are the questions that and challenges that are very much related to my line of research on metacognition, on wisdom, on awareness of knowledge limitations, and so on. And I think that's where just generally the notion of wisdom then comes in. But here again, I'm just justifying my academic myopia, and I'm sure other people who talk about, for instance, polarization or misinformation or existential risks through AI would say that whatever they're working on are the most important issues. I think all of those are important.
I cannot agree more with you, I have to admit. And I think what you say relates a lot to in one word populism. And by the way, I think it also relates a lot to misinformation. So I think misinformation is really related to these simple solutions. But because, in my opinion, when you tell that there is a simple solution, in a sense, it's almost a misinformation. Like, obviously, the leaders probably, I hope, they know that what they are saying, it cannot work, but they still say what the many people will be happy to hear. Anyways, what is your vision for our community? Let's say some years from now. Let's say 10, but any other number.
Well, I, those people who know me know that I'm not the most positive person when it comes to predicting the future. At the same time, I also think that we're often exaggerating and catastrophizing whenever we're making predictions. Yeah, I guess the first thing to consider here is when you think about visions for the community or for social sciences, the first question is, will there be any social sciences 10 years from now with the way how the world is moving forward? And a lot of people are worried about that, probably rightfully so. I do think that that worry is to some extent exaggerated because even in authoritarian countries, or countries with authoritarian tendencies, social science information has been important uh, for better or for worse. My main hope, and that's something that I wrote in the piece, Trends in Cognitive Sciences last year on when expert predictions fail, is that in 10 years, we will have great appreciation of more predictive methods. And what I mean by that is that we, in social psychology, in judgment decision making, in other fields in social sciences, have a very much focus on explaining the past. Our methods, our hypotheses are all about trying to unpack processes and phenomena that have occurred with very little focus on predicting the future. And I mean, the thing is, in statistics and philosophy of science, if you think about it, explanation is for prediction in the sense that your causal model has to be predictive by definition. And if you say, no, we're not actually predicting anything, we are only trying to explain what already has occurred, that seems kind of strange given the way how we're supposed to be thinking in science. So I'm coming from that school of philosophy of science where I think both explanation and prediction are important. I think we have to probably invest more in social sciences into training new generation of scientists to appreciate and develop methods for predicting, time-oriented methods, time series methods, advanced computational methods, formal methods, things that I, for instance, have not had the pleasure to encounter during my graduate training and had to learn in part by myself, and I'm still kind of learning about those. And I hope that in the next 10 years, we will have a generation of scholars who will not only try to post hoc explain everything, but also be just a tiny bit better at predicting something, because that's the thing that will matter if you really want to help policymakers, if you really want to bring some kind of evidence-based insights to help our societies, to help our communities.
I personally have to admit that I'm so happy to hear that because, okay, my line of research is also mostly focused on prediction rather than explanation. So I'm really glad to hear that you also think that prediction has a very important part. I hope this shift will do happen in the upcoming years. Tell me, please, how do you manage to find a work-life balance, if at all you have a work-life balance? How, like, relatedly, how many hours do you work?
Well, it's a very difficult question to answer, I think, because uh, you first need to figure out what balance is. And I find somebody who's working on the topic of wisdom or wise judgment, even when I write that the wisdom is about balance, I at the end ask myself, do I really know where is that balance? Like, is like 3 hours of work to 1 hour of fun? Is it or is the ratio different? Where exactly do we draw the line? Where is it balanced? And so for me, that's very difficult because of that. Of course, this is based on my personal experience. You know, you gotta be mindful of your bodily and mental limitations. So like, for instance, even if you want to work really, really hard, and if you don't give yourself a rest, and if you don't focus on other aspects of your life that restrict your focus only to what's in front of your computer or your manuscript, then you will not be as sharp and as mentally there as you probably could be if you, for instance, take a break, take a walk, meet friends, talk with them, and so on and so forth. So that's kind of there's a bi-directional relationship, and I think also like the many interesting ideas do come from either disengaging and taking sort of an outsider perspective on things that you're working on, taking a break and just maybe engaging with friends, or taking a hike, or doing some kind of sport that you love, or some kind of other activity that you love. And sometimes, so like for instance, I would bring in ideas from observation of the normal world, non-academic world, into my research. So for me, like, you know, there is a fusion integration instead of separation and balancing, because I don't even know how to balance. In terms of the number of hours, it's also very tricky because of this fusion. So if I, for instance, look at my daily routine, I deliberately build in elements where I would, for instance, of course, do some physical exercise. I would build in breaks because I just can't, for instance, work on something for 5 hours without my back starting to hurt. But at the same time, I also know that if I'm in the flow and I just love it and I just work on something, I forget the whole world around me, and it's kind of fun. But then, okay, how many hours did I actually end up working? And am I working when I'm on a hike, but somehow the idea about some kind of research comes to my mind, or if I discuss the future of AI and labor market with some friends at a glass of wine, is this work, or is this just my life? Where does one lead to another? It's very hard to count the exact number of hours and the exact number of days. So for me, it's hard to separate those two. I do think that some people are better at that than others. I have always, since I can remember myself, been thinking about people in social context in my free life. That's why I became a psychologist and social cognitive scientist. But that also means that it's very, very hard for me to disengage. I mean, unless I do something really physical, which is why I sometimes do engage in those activities as well.
So this is one of the magics of the academia, that you can work and simultaneously not work, or not work, which is also a work in a sense, I think.
Yeah, it's like academics are like Schrodinger's cats of work. Are they working? Are they not working?
Good question. And you already mentioned it, but still, can you a little bit elaborate how do you find your research questions to work on?
Well, sometimes questions come to you serendipitously. Sometimes it's smart colleagues who are smarter than you who bring in things, and then you start thinking about them. Sometimes you read a paper and it's like, well, I can't believe somebody did something so stupid. Now let me do it differently and show them how they can improve this. So like I have this obnoxiously arrogant streak in me as well, unfortunately. But it comes from a good place, and I'm not saying like, oh no, haha, this is such a poorly designed experiment or such a poorly executed study. Instead of that, I'm thinking, okay, how could I actually do it better? What would be the way to really, really help shed light on a phenomenon? So for sometimes on the technical front, on methodological front, ideas come from there. Sometimes thinking about methods also allows me to think differently about conceptual ideas, new theoretical approaches. Mm, Many times the ideas about phenomena come from just observation of the world in front of you. So often I would say, and I have to admit, it's like kind of an interplay between you play with the data, uh, you try to understand what's going on there, you quiz some of yourself, thinking about possible explanations, and you observe the world more, then you talk to other people, then you collect more data, and it's kind of this kind of never-ending process. Yeah, so I mean, there are multiple routes. There's no one single solution, I think.
Definitely, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, as with the wise decisions, as you said before, it's often not a simple question. And tell me, please, if not this magical place called academia, what will you do in life?
Oh, well, I don't know. I mean, it varies. I used to dance before I had to stop for health-related reasons. So at some point in the past Igor wanted to be a dancer, but that's long behind me. That career is long behind me. I love cooking. I love traveling. So I don't think that's really a career, so to be a professional traveler, and professional eater. I mean, even though there's like, I think there are several documentaries on various platforms you could watch about people traveling and eating. Some of them are former professional chefs, but then I'm mindful that some of those also committed suicide. So maybe that's not a good direction to go either. But there is something alluring about it, though, isn't it? I mean, I enjoy that. I enjoy experiencing different cultures, experiencing different parts of the world. Um, yeah, so I mean, I guess uh, those are some ideas. I mean, I do like working with computers and with sort of like more technical aspects. So I have that streak in me as well. So maybe I would have been a computer scientist or an engineer if not for academia.
Which we might make your wife happier because then you will earn more money, I assume, probably.
Uh,
Uh,
well, I don't know. It depends.
Definitely. Anyways, as a young but very, very accomplished scholar, what is your advice for young scholars how to be successful in academia?
Um, well, be mindful that there's a lot of luck involved and a lot of serendipity in what you're doing, and that also means that you should be open-minded and remain curious. And it often helps to try to look outside of the box. And by that, I do not necessarily mean a particular lab that you're part of, but also of the discipline that you're coming from, because there is a very high chance that other disciplines, in particular in judgment decision making, have been thinking about a similar question as well, just approaching it from very different perspectives. So I strongly encourage this kind of cross-facilitation of methods and theoretical ideas. Finally, I do think that you should just talk to people, talk to friends, test them about your ideas, and talk to those from different fields and try to explain to them what you are actually interested in. Because sometimes by explaining to somebody who's coming outside of your group, you will develop a very different perspective on the issue itself.
I completely agree with you. Igor, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for this great interview. And I encourage those who have not watched your seminar talk to watch it on our website or in the link that we will also provide. And again, thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.